speech, I would like to introduce the audience to a Western philosophy that I've come across. I would introduce the audience to the origins of the Western philosophy of Stoicism. So let me ask everyone here, what would you do if you lost everything you owned? What if you were miles from home and you lost your money and your possessions? You would have nothing, no friends, no family. I can imagine that it would not be the best day of your life. But many of you would tell yourself such phrases like, why would this happen to me? Or you would curse yourselves with self-pity. What if I told you a story of a wealthy merchant in the ancient world who was able to overcome these obstacles by originating the philosophy of Stoicism? Stoicism is a Western philosophy founded by Zeno of Cyprus, a wealthy merchant who lost everything in a shipwreck and then he ended up in ancient Greece. With nothing much to do, he stumbled across a bookstore in ancient Greece and found a book about Socrates. Once he was intrigued by Socrates, he found himself in the university and founded the philosophy of Stoicism. And from what he gathered together, he founded the philosophy of Stoicism. He found a philosophy which teaches one to live a fulfilling life by having control over themselves and not outside of events. I came across this philosophy while doing one of my favorite hobbies, which is studying history. I tend to attempt to understand the past in order to understand the present. And when I came across the philosophy, I can safely say that it changed my perspective of many things. Today I will explain the practices of Stoicism, the lives of the men who embody them, and the practices which I practice myself. I must admit I'm not an expert on it, but I will do the very best I can to explain it in the best way. Now, Stoicism is a belief that individuals have control over themselves and not outside events. They're not worried about what happens to them. They only worry about that they have control over themselves. They understand when someone is born into this world that they inevitably will face hardships. They will point out that everyone suffers, that we all go through it, whether it's the loss of a loved one or the fear of the unknown. That because we have no control over these outside events, we should not let these things affect us. And one of the most famous stories would be Epictetus. He would recognize that, he would emphasize that you should only focus on what you have control of and not control of outside events, that you should be calm under a crisis, and that you should ignore what others think of you. And by the next, they also practice virtues, which I will go into, which are Stoic practices, which are courage, control, and curbing your desires. And in these next slides, I will try to do the best I can to explain these virtues which Stoics practice. Now, the first one, control. Epictetus was a Roman slave who was able to thrive through his own self by explaining that happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. Control. And the Stoic practice of controlling yourself emphasizes that control is within ourselves, and in order to live a virtuous life, we must let other things control ourselves. And with the next slide, I would also like to point out that these Stoics were able to overcome courage by even understanding that courage can be found within oneself, that even the small things, such as sometimes even to live, is an act of courage. In order to live a more thriving life, you have to be courageous and not let the small things bug you. And the also next slide, another Stoic practice that many people follow, would be desires. Epictetus also emphasized that if you curb your desires, don't set your heart on so many things that you will not get what you need. Don't let small things such as alcohol, lust, possessions control yourself, since they're the only things that will have control of yourselves. Stoicism is a very complex philosophy. briefly studied most of it. I really want to study more about it, but I do encourage you to study most of it you can. And many famous Stoics, I have mentioned Epictetus, but I also like to mention Marcus Aurelius, who I mentioned in my hero speech, who was a Roman emperor who was able to thrive in his own self, even though he was being Roman emperor and Epictetus being a Roman slave. They both would have been able to come to understanding that they live the lives that they have been, and that they have control over themselves. I would also like to mention one more thing, which is conquer. Stoics also believe in the practice of conquering themselves by understanding that once you conquer yourself, you also conquer the world. And I also would like to conclude that, although I want to get into more detail, I don't believe I'll have enough time, but I also like to point out that many Stoics who are famous around the world, such as Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jeff Bezos, even Warren Buffett, are confirmed Stoics who believe that controlling yourselves, not outside events, and overcoming fear, can thrive as a person, and you will live a happy and virtuous life. Thank you.